Shalom, shalom, everybody. Shalom, shalom. What up, what up? What up? Yowcha. Welcome back to the next session of Reading with SHILO. I'm SHILO. What up, baby? Moucha. Yeah, we out here about to finish up. Oh, Miss Zora Neale Hurston's book, Mules and Men. Shit, I was busy. And I apologize for being able to finish it off yesterday. That's what I should have did, but I didn't. I didn't do it. But we're going to do it today. Today I was painting and stuff. I had to get my stuff together for my chess pieces. Oh, yeah, I'm ready to dominate somebody. So yeah, man, we are here. We're gonna finish up, man. We got 3 chapters, 5, 6, 7 to read today, as well as the afterward. We're going to shoot for that. Man, I hope Miss Zora is safe out there messing with them hoodoo. Messing with all them hoodoo doctors and stuff like that. So we're gonna try to push. We're gonna try to, take part in this world-ending phenomenon that's taking place today. Just do my part by reading to end the world. Do my part. Wake up and show my obedience by reading. Anyway, man. Anyway. Hey, let's get it. Zora Neale Hurston's Mules and Men. Ooh, Mules and Men. Chapter 5 of Mules and Men. Dr. Duke in School of Folk Magic. He spends days and nights out in the woods and swamps and is therefore known as a swamper. A swamper is a root and conjure doctor who goes to the swamps and gathers his or her own herbs and roots. Most of the doctors buy their material from regular supply houses. He took me to the woods with him many times in order that I might learn the herbs by sight and scent. Not only is it important to be able to identify the plant, but the swamper must know when and how to gather it. For instance, the most widely used root, known as John the Conqueror, must be gathered before September the 21st. Wonder of the World root must be spoken to with ceremony before it is disturbed, or forces will be released that will harm whoever handles it. Snakes guard other roots and must not be killed. He is a man past 50, but very active. He believes his power is unlimited and that nothing can stand against his medicine. Yes, sir. How can I help you?
I'm trying to get it out, but I'm
Give it.
I'm trying to get it out.
You trying to get it out?
But it's a small one.
Man, you should just be able to eat this thing. Them gopher teeth. Chomp through it.
That's canada seeds. That's all that is. Kaboom.
There you go, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Just don't eat this. Well, you can eat the seeds too. Anyway. He is a man past 50, but very active. He believes his power is unlimited and that nothing can stand against his medicine. His specialty is law cases. People come to him from a great distance, and I know that he received a fee of $100 and $85 from James Beasley, who was in the parish prison accused of assault with attempt to murder. For that particular case, we went first to the cemetery. With his right hand, he took dirt from the grave of 9 children. I was not permitted to do any of this because I was only a beginner with him and had not the power to approach spirits directly. That might kill me with my audacity. The dirt was put into a new white bowl and carried back to the altar room and placed among the burning candles, facing the east. Then I was sent for sugar and sulfur. 3 teaspoons each of sugar and sulfur was added to the graveyard dirt. Then he prayed over it, while I knelt opposite him. The spirits were asked to come with power more than equal to the man, and afterwards I was sent out to buy a cheap suit of men's underclothes. This was turned wrong side out and dressed with the prepared graveyard dust. I had been told to buy a new pair of tan socks also, and these were dressed in the same way. As soon as Dr. Duke has been retained, Beasley was instructed to read the 35th Psalm every day until his case should be called. On the day he came up for trial, Dr. Duke took the new underclothes to the jail and put them on his client just before he started to march to the courtroom. The left sock was put on the wrong side out. Dr. Duke, like all of the conjure masters, has more than one way of doing every job. People are different, and what will win with one person has no effect with another. We had occasion to use all of the other ways of winning lawsuits in the course of practice. In one hard case, the prisoner had his shoes dressed with the court. This was to keep the court under his control. He wrote the judge's name 3 times, the prisoner's names 3 times, the district attorney's name 3 times, and folded them on paper small. And the prisoner was told to wear it in his shoe. Then we got some oil of rose geranium, lavender oil, verbena oil, put 3 drops of oil of geranium in 1/2 ounce jockey club, shook it, and gave it to the client. He must use 7 to 9 drops on his person in court, but we had to dress his clothes also. We went before court, set to dress the courtroom and jury box and judges stand, and have our clients take perfume and rub it on his hand and rub his face down his whole front. To silence opposing witnesses, we took a beef tongue, 9 pins, 9 needles, and split the beef tongue. We wrote the names of those against our man and cut the names out and beef gall and pinned the slit up with cross needles and pins. We hung the tongue up in a chimney, tip up, and smoked the tongue for 36 hours. Then we took it down and put it in the ice and lit on it from 3 to 4 black candles stuck in ice. Our client read the 22nd Psalm and 35th also because it was for murder. Then we asked the spirits for power more than equal to man. So many people came to Dr. Duke to be uncrossed that he took great pains to teach me that routine. He never let me perform it, but allowed me to watch him do it many times. Take 7 lumps of incense. Take 3 matches to light the incense. Wave the incense before the candles on the altar. Make client bow over the incense 3 times. Then circle him with a glass of water 3 times and repeat this 3 times. Fan him with the incense smoke 3 times, each time he bows his head. Then sprinkle him 7 times with water. Then lead him to and from the door and turn him round 3 times over incense that has been placed at the door. Then seek client and sprinkle him every corner of the room with water 3 times, and also 3 times down the middle of the room. Then go to another room and do the same. Smoke his underclothes and dress them. Don't turn the client's hand loose as he steps over the incense. smoke him at once at the door and 3 times at each corner. The room must be thoroughly smoked, even under the furniture, before the client leaves the room. After the evil has been driven out of him, it must also be driven from the room so it cannot return to him. So much has been said and written about hoodoo doctors driving people away from a place that we cannot omit mentioning it. This was one of Dr. Duke's specialities. A woman was tired of a no-good husband. She told us about him. I feel like I can't read good with that thing on my head. He won't work and make support for me. And he won't get on out the way and leave somebody else to do it. He spent up all my money playing coon can in college and then expect me to buy him a suit of clothes. And then he all the time fighting me to have him no more. You sure you don't want him no more, Dr. Duke asked her. You know, women get mad and say things that takes back overnight. Lord knows I means this. I don't want to meet him riding no walking. So Dr. Duke told her what to do. She must take the right foot track of her hateful husband and parch it in an old tin frying pan. When she picks it up, she must have a dark bottle with her to put the track in. Then she must get a dirt dauber nest. Who know what that is? Got some dirt dauber nest outside my house right now. Then she must get a dirt dauber nest, some cayenne pepper, and parch that together and add it to the track. Put all of this into a dirty sock and tie it up. She must turn the bundle from her always as she ties it. And when she gets within 40 feet of the river, she must run fast to the edge of the river while suddenly and hurl the sock over her left shoulder into the water and never look back and say, go quick in the name of the Lord. So she went off and I never saw her again. Dr. Samuel Jenkins lives across the river in Marrero, Louisiana. He does some work, but his great specialty is reading the cards. I have seen him glance at people without being asked or without using his card and making the most startling statements that all turned out to be true. A young matron went out with me to Dr. Jenkins one day, just for the sake of the ride. He glanced at her and told her that she was deceiving her husband with a very worthless fellow, that she must stop at once or she would be found. Her husband was most devoted, but once he mistrusted her, he would accept no explanations. This was late in October, and her downfall came in December. Dr. Charles S. Johnson, the well-known Negro sociologist, came to New Orleans on business while I was there, and since I had to see Dr. Jenkins, he went with me. Without being asked, Dr. Jenkins told him that he would receive a sudden notice to go on a long trip. The next day, Dr. Johnson received a wire sending him to West Africa. Once Dr. Jenkins put a light on a wish of mine that a certain influential white woman would help me, and assured me that she would never lose interest in me as long as she lived. The next morning at 10 o'clock, I received a wire from her stating that she would stand by me as long as she lived. He did this sort of thing day after day, and the faith in him is huge. Let me state here that the most of his clients are white and upper-class people at that. In appearance, he is a handsome, robust, dark-skinned man around 40. There are many superstitions concerning the dead. All over the South and in the Bahamas, the spirits of the dead have great power, which is used chiefly to harm. It will be noted how frequently graveyard dust is required in the practice of hoodoo, gopher dust, as it is often called. It is to be noted that in nearly all of the killing ceremonies, the cemetery is used. The Ewe-speaking peoples of the west coast of Africa, all making offerings of food and drink, particularly libations of palm wine and banana beer, upon the graves of the ancestors. It is to be noted in America that the spirit is always given a pint of good whiskey. He is frequently also paid for his labor in cash. It is well known that church members are buried with their feet to the east so that they will arise on the last day facing the rising sun. I did not know that. That is some good information right there. I wonder if that's real. I wonder if that's real. I don't like going to cemeteries, but that shit might make me go to the cemeteries with a compass and see if these foots is east. The theory is that sunlight will do them harm rather than hide their faces from an angry God. Ghosts cannot cross water, so that if a hoodoo doctor wishes to sick a dead spirit upon a man who lives across water, he must first hold a mirror ceremony to fetch the victim from across the water. People who die from a sick bed may walk any night, but Friday night is the night of the people who died in the dark, who were executed. These people have never been in the light. They died with a black cap over their face. Thus, they are blind. On Friday nights, they visit the folks who died from sick beds, and they lead the blind ones wherever they wish to visit. Ghosts feel hot and smell faintish. According to testimony, all except those who died in the dark may visit their former homes every night at 12 o'clock, but they must be back in the cemetery at 2 o'clock sharp, or they will be shut out by the watchman and must wander about for the rest of the night. This is why the living are frightened by seeing ghosts at times. Some spirits have lingered too long with the living person that it still loves and has been shut out from home. Pop Dorman of Fernandina, Florida, says they are not asleep at all. They sings and his church and they sings and has church and has a happy time. But some are spiteful and show themselves to scare folks. Their voices are high and thin. Some ghosts grow very fat if they get plenty to eat. They are very fond of honey. Some who have been to the holy place wear 7-starred crowns and are very cautious and sensible. Dirt from sinners' graves is supposed to be a very powerful, but some hoodoo doctors will use only that from the graves of infants. Shit. The infants down here, as far as I know, like when my little brother died, he wasn't buried in the ground. He was buried on top of my grandmother's grave, his grandmother's grave. Yeah, on top of his grandmother's grave, because we got different daddies. But my grandmother was buried above ground, and they got a little bitty, I guess you could call it a sepulcher, but a little bitty brick box that has my little brother coffin inside of it. So I don't know where they're getting the dirt from, especially down here. A lot of places in Louisiana, you have to be built above ground anyway, because they don't come up out the ground. Basically, to get unruly and kill others for the pleasure of killing. It is too dangerous to commission. The spirit newly released from the body is likely to be destructive. This is why a cloth is thrown over the face of the clock in the death chamber, and looking glass is covered over. The clock will never run again. nor will the mirror ever cast any more reflections if they are not covered so that the spirit cannot see them. And when it rains at a funeral, it is said that God wishes to wash their tracks off the face of the earth. They were so displeasing to him. If a murder victim is buried in the sitting position, the murderer will be speedily justice. The victim sitting before the throne is able to demand that justice be done. If he is lying prone, he cannot do this. A fresh egg in the hand of a murder victim will prevent the murderers going far from the scene. The egg represents life, and so the dead victim is holding the life of the murderer in his hand. Sometimes the dead are offended by acts of the living and slap the face of the living. When this happens, the head is slapped one-sided, and the victim can never straighten his neck. Speaking gently to ghosts. Damn, is that a crick in the neck? Is that when you get a crick in the neck, you've been slapped by a ghost? Oh, that ghost got me last night. What I did? What did I do? Sometimes the dead are offended by the acts of the living and slap the face of the living. And when this happens, the head is slapped one-sided and the victim can never straighten his neck. Speak gently to ghosts and do not abuse the children of the dead. It is not good to answer the first time that your name is called. It may be a spirit, and if you answer it, you will die shortly. They never call more than once at a time, so by waiting, you will miss probable death. Hey, that was chapter 5. This is chapter 6. Before telling of my experiences with Kitty Brown, I want to relate the following conjure stories, which them playing tic-tac-toe right now. After that's all they're doing is playing tic-tac-toe. Okay. Well, just don't worry about it. We'll play our own game after I'm done reading. You let them play that. Just let it go through. Watch what they're doing. Let it. Asked her neighbor to lend her a quarter. Yes. Get them for you. Obliging neighbor to smile and went. Soon after, another. Celestine is not mad anymore about the word we had last week. She was just in to pay me a visit. Humph, snorted the neighbor. Maybe she came in to dust your doorstep. You shouldn't let people in that hate you. They come to do you harm. Man, wise words. Oh no, she was very nice. She borrowed a quarter from me. Did she ask for small change? Yes. Then she is still mad and means to harm you. They always try to get small change from the ones they wish to harm. Celestine always trying to hurt someone. You think so? You make me very scared. She go send your son to see what she is doing. I bet you she has a candle on your money right now. The boy we sent and came running back in terror. Oh, mama, come look at what Tank Celestine is doing. The two women crept to the crack of old Celestine's door. There in midsummer was the chimney ablaze with black candles, a cup in front of each candle, holding the money. The old woman was, man, they do not want me reading this thing today. Shit, they keep cutting off on me. She burst into the house without ceremony, and all the trim heard about the fight that followed. Miss Grant lived down below Canal Street and was a faithful disciple of Dr. Strong, a popular hoodoo doctor who lived on Urquhart Street near St. Claude. One hot summer night, Mr. Grant couldn't sleep, so he sat on the upper balcony in his underwear chewing tobacco. Miss Grant was in bed. A tall black woman lived 2 blocks down the street. She and Mrs. Grant had had some words a few days past, and the black woman had been to the hoodoo doctor and brought a powder to throw at Mrs. Grant's door. She had waited till the hour of 2 in the morning to do it. Just as she was dusting the door, Mr. Grant on the balcony spit, and some of the tobacco juice struck the woman. She had no business at the Grant house at all, let alone at 2 o'clock in the morning throwing war powder against the door. But even so, she stepped back and gave Mr. Grant a piece of her mind that was highly seasoned. It was a splendid bit of Creole invective art. He was very apologetic. But Miss Grant came to the door to see what was the trouble. Her enemy had retreated, but as soon as she opened the door, she saw the white powder against the door and on the steps. Moreover, there was an eggshell on each step. Miss Grant, shit, man, this making me think of some shit I saw back in the day. Making me think of some shit I might have seen back in the day. Whew. She climbed into their backyard and woke up the family. She must have some urine from the boys. This, she neighbor's front gate to her own door and dashed it over the door, and she must have some river water in which to dissolve the lye. All this was dashed against the door and the steps. Early the next morning, she was at the door of Dr. Strong. He congratulated her on the steps of powder was a cook. She asked her, and as soon as she appeared, bam, 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 busted upside her head. Bam, went the bottles over her head and the wine flowed. But she fought back, and in the frankest, she bit Mrs. Grant's thumb severely, drawing her wine. This complicated affairs again. Something must be done to neutralize this loss of blood. She hurried home and called one of the boys next door and said, "Son, here's $5. Go get me a black chicken, not a white feather on him, and keep the change for your troubles." The chicken was brought. She seized her husband's razor and split the live bird down the breast and thrust her fist inside. As the hot blood and entrails enveloped her hand, she went on into a sort of frenzy, shouting, "I got her! I got her! I got her now!" A wealthy planter in Middle Georgia was very arrogant in his demeanor towards his Negro servants. He boasted of being unreconstructed and that he didn't allow no niggers to sass him. A Negro family lived on his place and worked for him. The father, it seems, was the yard man, the mother, the cook. The boys worked in the fields and the daughters worked in the house and waited on the table. There was a huge rib roast of beef one night for dinner. The white man spoke very sharply for some reason to the girl, and she sassed right back. He jumped to his feet and seized the half-eaten roast by the naked rib and struck her with the vertebrae end. The blow landed squarely on her temple, and she dropped dead. The cook was attracted to the dining room door by the tumult. The white man resumed his seat and was replenishing his plate. He coolly told the mother of the dead girl to call Dave, and you all take the sow up off the floor. The sow, huh? Dave came, and the parents bore away the body of their daughter, the mother weeping. Now Dave was known to dabble in hoodoo. The Negroes around both depended upon him and feared him. He came back to clear away the blood of the murdered girl. He came with a pail and scrubbing brush. But first, he sopped his handkerchief in the blood and put it into his pocket. Then he washed up the floor. That night, the Negro family moved away. They knew better than to expect any justice. They knew better than to make too much fuss about what had happened. But less than 2 weeks later, the planter looked out of his window one night and thought he saw Dave running across the lawn away from the house. He put up the window and called to the man what he was doing in his place, but the figure disappeared in the trees. He shut the window and went to his wife's room to tell her about it and found her in laughing hysteria. She laughed for 3 days despite all that the doctors did to quiet her. And on the 4th day, she became maniacal and attacked her husband. Shortly, it was realized that she was hopelessly insane and she had to be put into an institution. Get your ass out here, crazy. She made no attempt to hurt anyone except her husband. She was gentleness itself with her 2 children. The plantation became intolerable to the planter, so he decided to move. So he decided to move to more cheerful surroundings with his children. He had some friends in South Carolina, so he withdrew his large account at the bank and transferred it to South Carolina and set up a good home with the help of the housekeeper. And 2 years passed and he became more cheerful. Then one night he heard steps outside his window and looked out. He saw a man, a Negro. He was sure it was old Dave. The man ran away as before. He called and ran from the house in pursuit. He was determined to kill him if he caught him, for he began to fear ambush from the family of the girl he had murdered. He ran back to get his son, his gun, and the dogs to trail the Negro. As he burst into the front door, he was knocked down by a blow to his head, but was not unconscious. His 20-year-old son was raving and screaming about him with the poker within his hand. He struck blow after blow, his father dodging and covering himself as best as he could. The housekeeper rushed up and caught the poker from behind and saved the man on the floor. The boy was led away weeping by the woman, but renewed his attack upon his father later in the night. This kept up for more than a month before the devoted parent would consent to his confinement in an institution for the criminally insane. This was a crushing blow to the proud and wealthy ex-planter. He once more gathered his goods and moved away. But a year later, the visitation returned. He saw Dave. He was sure of it. This time he locked himself in his room, and asked the housekeeper through the door about his daughter. She reported the girl missing. He decided at once that his black enemies had carried off his daughter Abby. He made ready to pursue. He unlocked the door and stepped into the hall to put on his overcoat. When he opened the closet, his daughter pointed the gun in his face and pulled the trigger. The gun snapped. It happened to be unloaded. She had hidden in the closet to shoot him whenever he emerged from his room. Her disordered brain had overlooked the cartridges, so he moved to Baltimore, out in a fashionable neighborhood. The nurse who came to look after his deranged daughter had become his mistress. He choked or skulked about, fearful in every premises. He gave this life to have his son released in his charges. But 2 weeks later, as he drove the family out, the young man sitting in the rear seat attacked him from behind and would have killed him, but for the paramour and the traffic officer. When I was a boy, about 10 years old, there was a man named Levi Conway, whom I knew well. He operated a ferry and had money and was highly respected by all. He was very careful about what he wore. He was tall and brown and wore a pompadour. He usually wore a broad-brimmed Stetson. He began to change. People thought he was going crazy. He owned lots of residential property, but he quickly lost everything in some way that nobody seemed to understand. He grew careless in his dress and became positively untidy. He even got to the point where he began to pick up junk, old boilers, stones, wheels, pieces of harnesses. He'd bring it home and pile it up in his backyard. This kept up for 10 years or more. Finally, he got sick in bed and couldn't kept house for him. She was worried over his sickness, so she decided to get a woman from the trimming to find out what was going wrong. The woman came. She was about 50 with a sore on her nose. She looked at Levi in bed. Then she came out to thank Linda. Sure, something has been done. I don't believe I can do anything to save him now, but I can tell you who did the work. You fix a place for me to stay here tonight, and in the morning I will tell you. Early the next morning, she sent for a heart of sheep or beef. She had them get her a package of needles and a new kettle. She lit a wood fire in the yard and filled the kettle 1/3 full of water and stood over the pot with the heart. She stuck the needles in one by one, muttering and murmuring as she stuck them in. When the water was boiling hard, she dropped the heart in. It was about 11 o'clock in the morning. Now we shall know who has done this thing to Levi. In a few minutes, the one who did it will come and ask for two things. Don't let him have either. In a few minutes, in came Pierre Vautier, a man whom all of us knew. He asked how Levi was. They told him pretty bad. He asked, would they let him have 2 eggs? And they said they had none. Then he asked, would they lend him a wheelbarrow? And they said it wasn't there. The old woman winked and said, that is he. He went on off. Then she told them to look into the pot, and they did. The heart was gone. A week later, Levi died. Man. This is the funny part. Sometime after that, my older brother, my cousin, and I rode over to the west bank of the river. Just knocking about as boys will, we found an old leaky boat turned upside down on the bank just out of reach of the water. I wondered who owned the piece of trash. My brother told me it belonged to Pierre Vautier. I said, why doesn't he get a decent boat? This is too rotten to float. I turned it over and found a great deal of junk under it. Bundles tied up in rags, old bottles and cans, and the like. So I started to throwing the stuff into the water, and my cousin helped me. We pushed the boat in too. My brother tried to stop us. I forget now how it was that Pierre Vautier knew we did that. But 2 days later, I began to shake as if I had an ague. An ague, I don't know what that is. A-G-U-E. Let's look. I had the ague. A-G-U-E. Ague. A-G-U-E. Come on, turn the page. A-G-U-E. It's not in here. I'm not going to look up the other one yet. Nothing the doctors could do stopped me. And 2 days later, my cousin began to shake. And 2 days after that, my brother started to shake. It was 3 or 4 months before we could be stopped. But my brother stopped first, then my cousin, then at last I stopped. That was chapter 6. Chapter 7. Kitty Brown is a well-known hoodoo doctor of New Orleans and a Catholic. She liked to make marriages and put lovers together. She is squat, black, and benign. Often, when we had leisure, she told funny stories. Her herb garden was pretty full, and we often supplied other doctors with plants. Very few raise things since the supply houses carry about everything that is needed. But sometimes a thing is wanted fresh from the ground. That's where Kitty's garden came in. When the matter of my initiation came up, she said, in order for you to reach the spirit, somebody has got to suffer. I'll suffer for you because I'm strong. It might be the death of you. It was in October of 1928, when I was a pupil of hers, that I shared in a hoodoo dance. This was not a pleasant dance, but ceremonial. In another generation, African dances were held in Congo Square, now Beauregard Square. Those were held for social purposes and were on the same type as the fire dances and jumping dances in the present of the Bahamas. But the hoodoo dance is done for a specific purpose. It is always the case of death to the enemy that calls for a dance. They are very rare, even in New Orleans. They are very rare, even in New Orleans now, even within the most inner circle, and no layman ever participates, nor has ever been allowed to witness such a ceremony. This is how the dance came to be held. I sat with my teacher in front of the room as the various cases were disposed of. It was my business to assist wherever possible, such as running errands for materials or verifying addresses, locating materials in the various drawers and cabinets, undressing and handling patients, writing out formulas as they were dictated, and finally making hands. At last, of course, I could do all of the works while she looked on and made corrections where necessary. This particular day, a little before noon, came Rachel Rowe. She was dry with anger, hate, outraged confidence, and desire for revenge. John Doe had made violent love to her, had lain in her bed and bosom for the last 3 years, had received of Rachel everything material and emotional a woman can give. They had both worked and saved and had contributed to a joint savings account. And now, only the days before yesterday, he had married another. He had lured a young girl, a pretty girl, to his bed with Rachel's earnings. And yes, had set up housekeeping with Rachel's sweat and blood. She had gone to him, and he had laughed at her former sweetheart. Yes. The police could do nothing, no. The bank was sorry, but they could do nothing, no. So Rachel had come to Kitty. Did she still love her John Doe? Perhaps. She didn't know. If he would return to her, she should strive to forget. She should strive to forget. But she was certain he would not return. How could he? But if he were dead, she could smile again, yes. Could go back to her work and save money, more money, yes. Perhaps she might meet a man who restore her confidence in menfolk. Kitty appraised her quickly. A dance could be held for him that would carry him away right now, but they cost something. How much? A whole lot. How much can you bring me? I got $37. That ain't enough. Got to pay the dancers to set the table. $100 was agreed upon. It was paid by 7 o'clock the same night, and we were kept very busy, for the dance was set from 10 to 1 the next day. Those being bad hours, I ran to certain addresses to assemble a sort of college of bishops to be presented and participate. The table was set with cake, wine, roast duck, and barbecued goat. By 9:30 the next morning, the other 5 participants were there and had dressed for the dance. A dispute arose about me. Some felt I had not gone far enough to dance. I could wait upon the altar but not take the floor. And finally, I was allowed to dance as a delegate for my master, who had a troublesome case of neuritis. The food was being finished off in the kitchen, and promptly on the stroke of 10, Death mounted his black draped throne and assumed his regal crown. Death being represented by a rudely carved wooden statue, bust-length. A box was draped in black satin, and Kitty placed him upon it and set his red crown on. She hobbled back to her seat and had the petition and the name of the man written on 7 slips of paper, 1 for each participant. I was told to stick them in Death's grinning. I did so. Command, I upended 9 black tapers that protruded. 9 black tapers, that had been dressed by the bath in whiskey and bad vinegar, and bit off the butt end to light, calling upon Death to take notice. As I had been instructed, I said, "Spirit of Death, take notice. I am fixing your candles for you. I want you to hear me." I said this 3 times, and the assembly gave 3 snaps with the thumb and middle finger. Yes, sir, I can.
I was wondering what was that.
My page stopper. That's what I call it, a page stopper. I hold it when I use it right. The candles were set upside down and lit on the altar, 3 to the left of Death, 3 to the right, and 3 behind him. I resumed my seat, and everyone was silent until Kitty was possessed. The exaltation caught like fire. Then B arose drunkenly and danced a few steps. The clapping began lightly. He circled the room, then prostrated himself before the altar, and getting to his hands and knees, with his teeth pulled one of the slips from the jaws of Death. He turned a violent somersault and began the dance, not intricate, but violent and muscle twitching. We were to dance 3 hours, and the time was divided equally, so that the more participants, the less time each was called upon to dance. There were 6 of us, since Kitty could not actively participate, so that we each had 40 minutes to dance. Plenty of liquor was provided, so that when one appeared exhausted, the bottle was pressed to his lips and he danced on. But the fury of the rhythm, more than the stimulant, kept the dancers going. The heel patting was a perfect drum rhythm, and the hand clapping had various stimulating breaks. At any rate, no one fell from exhaustion, though I know that even I, the youngest, could not have danced continuously on an ordinary dance floor unsupported by a partner for that length of time. Nearly all ended on the moment in a twitchy collapse, and the next most inspiring prostrated himself and began his dance with the characteristic somersault. Death was being continuously besought to follow the footsteps of John Doe. There was no regular formula. They all talked to him on their own way, and the others calling out to the dancers to talk to him. Some of the postures were obscene in the extreme. Some were grotesque, limping steps of old men and women. Some were mere agile leapings, but the faces, that is where the dedication lay. When the fourth dancer had finished and lay upon the floor, retching in every muscle, Kitty was taken. The call had come for her. I could not get upon the floor quickly enough for the others and was hurled before the altar. It got me there, and I danced. I didn't know how, but at any rate, when we sat about the table later, I agreed that Mother Kitty had done well to take me. I have neglected to say that one or two of the other dancers remained upon the floor in the spirit after their dance and had to be lifted up and revived at the end. The death had some of all the food placed before him. An uncorked pint of good whiskey was right under his nose. He was paid 15 cents and remained on his throne until 1 o'clock that night. Then all of the food before him was taken up with the tablecloth on which it rested and was thrown to the Mississippi River. The person danced upon is not supposed to live more than 9 days after the dance. I was very eager to see what would happen in this case, but 5 days after the dance, John Doe deserted his bride from the comforting arms of Rachel, and she hurried to Mother Kitty to have the spell removed. She said he complained of breast pains, and she was fearfully afraid for him. So I was sent to get the beef heart out of the cemetery, which had been put there as of the routine, and John and Rachel made use of the new furniture brought for his bride. I think he feared that Rachel might have had him fixed, so he probably fled to her as soon as the zest for his new wife had abated. Kitty began by teaching me various ways bringing back a man or woman who had left his or her mate. She had plenty to work on. In love cases, the client is often told what to do at home. Minnie Foster was the best customer Kitty had. She wanted something for every little failing in her lover. Kitty said to her one day, "You must be scared of yourself with that man of yours." "No, ma'am, I ain't, but I love him, and I just want to make sure. Just you give me something to make his love more stronger." "All right, Minnie, I'll do it, but you ain't got no reason to be so unsettled with me behind you. Do like I say, and you'll be all right. Use 6 red candles. Stick 60 pins in each candle, 30 on each side. Write the names of your sweetheart 3 times. 1 on a small square of paper, and stick it underneath the candle. Burn one of these prepared candles each night for 6 nights. Make 6 slips on paper and write the name of the loved one once on each slip. Then put a pin in the paper on all 4 sides, of the name. Each morning, take one of the 60 pins left from the burning of the candles and save them. Then smoke the slip of paper with the 4 pins in it, and in it an incense smoke. Yes, sir. And bury it with the pins underneath your doorstep. The piece of paper with the name written on 3 times, upon which each candle stands while burning, must be kept each day until the last candle is burned. Then bury it in the same hole with the rest. When you are sticking the pins in the candles, keep repeating, "Tumba-walla, bumba-walla, bring Gabe Staggers back to me." Minnie paid her $5, thanked her loudly, and hurried off to tighten the love shackles on her Gabriel. But the following week, she was back again. "Ain't you got that man to you wishes yet, Minnie?" Kitty asked, half in fun and half in impatience. "He loved me, I believe, but he gone off to Mobile with a construction game, and I got scared he might not come back. Something might delay him on his trip." "Oh, all right, Minnie. Go do like I say, and he'll sure be back. Write the name of the absent party 6 times on paper. Put the paper in a water glass with 2 tablespoons full of quicksilver on it. This damn Minnie is troublesome, man. I would hate to have an old lady like her. Oh man, this girl, she getting on my nerves just reading about her. That nigga need to go. Run from Minnie. Minnie tripping. Write the name of the absent party 6 times on paper. Put the paper in the water glass with 2 tablespoons of quicksilver on it. Write his or her name 3 times each on 6 candles and burn one on the windowsill in the daytime for 6 days. Minnie paid and went home, but a week later she was back, washed down in tears, so Kitty gave her stronger help. This is bound to bring him. Can't help it, Minnie. Now go home and stop fretting and do this. Write his name 3 times. Dig a hole in the ground. Get the left foot sore sock from him secretly. His hat band maybe also. Put the paper with the name in the hole first, then the sock or hatband. Then light a red candle on top of it all and burn it. Put a spray of sweet basil in the glass of water beside the candle. Light the candle at noon and burn until 1. Light it again at 6 p.m. and burn until 7. Always pinch out the candle, never blow it. After the candle is lit, turn the barrel over the hole. I wonder if they writing all this shit down, man. This is a lot of stuff to remember, man. It's a lot of stuff to remember. Ooh. Put a spray of sweet basil in the glass of water beside the candle. Light the candle at noon and burn until 1. Light it again at 6 and burn until 7. Always pinch out the candle, never blow out. After the candle is lit, turn the barrel over the hole. When you get in the place, knock on it 3 times to call the spirit and say, "Tumblewalla, Bumblewalla, bring Gabriel staggers home to me." Man, another storm of tears. Miss Kitty, Gabriel done got to the place. I can't tell him his eyes is black. Gabriel done got to the place. I can't tell him his eyes is black. What can I do to rule the man I love? Do like I say, honey, and you can rule. Get his sock. Take 1 silver dime, some hair from his head or his hatband. Lay the sock out on the table, bottom up. Write his name 3 times and put it on the sock. Place the dime on the name and the hair or hatband on the dime. Put a piece of his lotus stone. It says it's a magic iron ore. He lotus stone on the top of the hair and sprinkle it with steel dust. As you do this, say, "Feed the he, feed the she." That is that he that you call feeding the lodestone. Then fold the sock heel on the toe and roll it all up together tight. Pin the bundle by crossing 2 needles. Then wet it with whiskey and set it up over a door. And don't allow him to go off no more. Do you going to lose all control? Now listen, honey. This is the way to change a man's mind about going away. Take the left, set it up straight, then roll it 1/2 over first to the right, then to the left. Roll it to a coming in door and point it straight in the door, and he can't leave. Hatband or sock can be made into a ball and roll the same way, but it must be put under the sill or over the door. He's gonna have me looking for all type of little things. Once sis got hungry and caught herself a rat and set herself down to eat him. Rat tried to get loose, but sis cat was too fast and strong. So just as the cat started to eat him, he says, "Hold on there, sis cat. Ain't you got no manners at all? You got to set up the table and eat that washing your face and hands." So sis cat was mighty hungry, but she hate for the rat to think she ain't got no manners. So she went to the water and washed her face and hands, and when she got back, the rat was gone. So the cat caught herself a rat again and sat down to eat. So the rat said, "Where's your manners at, sis? You going to eat that washing your face and hands?" "Oh, I got plenty manners," the cat told him. "But I eats my dinners and wash my face and uses my manners afterwards." So she ate them. She ate right on them and washed her face and hands. And cat's been washing after eating ever since. I'm sitting here like sis cat, washing my face and using my manners. That was chapter 7. That was chapter 7. Let's read this afterwards. We'll come back and see about the other parts, the remedies. We might have to come back. We might have to. I might not even read the remedies. I'm definitely gonna read the afterwards. It's about 7 pages of remedies. I'll read what the remedies are for, and then we'll read the afterwards. Okay, formula of hoodoo doctors. It's concerning sudden death. It has 10 things you do. To rent a house, for bad work or death, for court scrapes, to kill and harm, running feet, to make a man come home, to make people love you, to break up a love affair. Then you have paraphernalia of conjures. About 38 things. Then you have prescription of root doctors. And you have a prescription for gonorrhea, syphilis, for bladder trouble, for fistula, rheumatism, for swelling, for blindness, for lockjaw, for flooding, for sick at the stomach, live things in the stomach or the fits, medicine to purge, for loss of mind, make a tonic, and something for poisons. And the afterwards. Let's read the afterwards. Afterwards, Zora Neale Hurston, a Negro way of saying. All right, a Negro way of saying. Let's see. The Reverend Harry Middleton Hyatt, an Episcopal priest whose 5-volume classic collection, Hoodoo, Conjuration, Witchcraft, and Root Work, more than reply returned an investment of 40 years research, once asked me during an interview in 1977 what had become of another eccentric collector whom he admired. "I met her in the field in the 30s, I think." He reflected for a few seconds. That her name was Zora. It was an innocent question made reasonable by the body of confused and often contradictory rumors that made Zora Neale Hurston's own legend as richly curious and as dense as are the black myths she did so much to preserve in her classic anthropological works, Mules and Men, and Tell My Horse, in her fiction. You might have to see what that is, Tell My Horse. A graduate of Barnard, where she studied under Franz Boas, Zora Neale Hurston published 7 books, 4 novels, 2 books of folklore, and an autobiography, and more than 50 short works between the middle of the Harlem Renaissance and the end of the Korean War. When she was the dominant Black woman writer of the United States, the dark obscurity into which her career then lapsed reflects her staunchly independent political stances rather than any defiance of craft or vision. Virtually ignored after the early 50s. Excuse me. DJ! DJ! Can you grab me a bottle of water, DJ? Man, can you give me a bottle of water, please? Please give me a bottle. I called DJ, but thank you for coming. Virtually ignored after the early 50s, even the Black arts movements in the 60s, an otherwise noisy and intense spell of Black image and myth making that rescued so many Black writers from remandered oblivion. Hurston embodied a more or less harmonious but nevertheless problematic unity of opposites. It is this complexity that refuses to lend itself to the glib categories of radical or conservative, Black or Negro, revolutionary or Uncle Tom, categories of little use in literary criticism. It is this same complexity embodied in her fiction that, until Alice Walker published her important essay In Search of Zora Neale Hurston in Miss Magazine in 1975, had made Hurston's place in Black literary history an ambiguous one at best. Thank you very much, son. Okay, I'm not worried about no scarecrow. Scarecrow? Yes, sir. The rediscovery of Afro-American writers has usually turned on larger political criteria, of which the writer's work is supposedly a mere reflection. The deeply satisfying aspects of the rediscovery of Zora Neale Hurston is that Black women generated primarily to establish a maternal literary ancestry. Alice Walker's moving essay recounts her attempts to find Hurston's unmarked grave in the Garden of the Heavenly Rest, a segregated cemetery in Fort Pierce, Florida. Hurston became a metaphor for the Black woman writer's search for tradition. The craft of Alice Walker, Gail Jones, Gloria Naylor, and Toni Cade Bambara bears in markedly different ways strong affinities with Hurston's. Their attention to Hurston signifies a novel sophistication in Black literature. They read Hurston not only for the spiritual kinship inherent in such relations, but because she used Black vernacular speech and rituals in ways subtle and various to chart the coming of conscious of Black women. To chart the coming to consciousness of Black women, so glaringly absent in other Black fiction. This use of the vernacular became the fundamental framework for all but one of her novels, and is particularly effective in her classic work, Their Eyes Were Watching God, published in 1937, which is more closely related to Henry James' The Portrait of a Lady and Jean Toomer's Cain than that of Langston Hughes and Richard Wright's proliterary literature so popular in the Depression. The charting of Janie Crawford's fulfillment as an autonomous imagination, Their Eyes, is a lyrical novel that correlates the need of her first two husbands for ownership of progressively larger physical space and the gaudy accoutrements of upward mobility with the suppression of self-awareness in their wife. Roustabout called Tea Cake, whose unstructured frolic centered round and about the Florida swamps, does Janie at last bloom, and does the large pear tree that stands beside her grandmother's tiny log cabin. She saw a dust-bearing beast sink into a sanctum of the bloom. The thousand sister calaxes arched to meet the love embrace, and the ecstatic shiver of the tree from root to tiniest branch, creaming in every blossom and frothing with delight. So this was a marriage. To plot Janie's journey from the object to subject, the narrative of the novel shifts from third to a blend of first and third person known as free indirect discourse, signifying this awareness of self in Janie. Their Eyes is a bold feminist novel, the first to be explicitly so in the Afro-American tradition. Yet it as an instrument of injury and salvation, of selfhood and empowerment. It suggests many of the themes that inspired Hurston's I don't know how to pronounce this word. Oeuvre. Hurston's Ouvre, in themes that inspired Hurston's Ouvre as a whole. Part 2. One of the most moving passages in American literature is Zora Neale Hurston's account of her last encounter with her dying mother, found in the chapter entitled Wandering in her autobiography, Dust Tracks on the Road in 1942. As I crowded in, they lifted up the bed and turned it around so that Mama's eyes would face east. I thought that she looked at me as the head of the bed reversed. Her mouth was slightly open, but her breath took up so much of her strength that she could not talk. But she looked at me, or so I felt, to speak for her. She depended on me for her voice. We began to understand the rhetorical distance that separated Hurston from her contemporaries if we compare this passage with the similar scene published just 3 years later in Black Boy by Richard Wright. Hurston's dominant Black male contemporary and rival, once in the night, my mother called me to bed and told me that she could not endure the pain and she wanted to die. I held her hand and begged her to be quiet. That night, I ceased to react to my mother. My feelings were frozen. If Hurston represents her final moments with her mother in terms of the search of certain schools, which grew into a symbol in my mind, gathering to itself the poverty, the ignorance, the helplessness. Few authors in the Black tradition have less in common than Zora Neale Hurston and Richard Wright. And whereas Wright would reign through the 40s as our predominant author, Hurston's fame reached its zenith in 1943 with a Saturday Review cover story honoring the success of Dust Tracks. And 7 years later, she would be serving as a maid in Rivo Alta, Florida. 10 years after that, she would die in the county welfare home in Fort Pierce, Florida. How could the recipient of 2 Guggenheims and the author of 4 novels, a dozen short stories, 2 musicals, 2 books on Black mythology, dozens of essays, and a prize-winning autobiography virtually disappear from her readingship for 3 full decades? There are no easy answers to this quandary, despite the concerted attempts of scholars to resolve it. It is clear, however, that the love diverse and enthusiastic responses that Hurston's work engenders today were not shared by several of her influential Black male contemporaries. The reasons for this are complex and stem largely from what we might think as their racial ideologies. Part of Hurston's received heritage, and perhaps the paramount received notion that links the novels of manners in the Harlem Renaissance, the social realism of the 30s, and the idea that racism had reduced Black people to mere ciphers, to beings who only react to the omnipresent racial oppression, whose culture is deprived, where different, and whose psyches are in the main pathological. Albert Murray, the writer and social critic, calls this the social science fiction monster. Socialists, separatists, and civil rights advocates alike have been devoured by this beast. And Hurston thought this idea degraded its propagation in a trap and railed against it. It was, she said, upheld by the sobbing school of Negrohood, who held that nature somehow has given them a dirty deal. And unlike Hughes and Wright, Hurston chose deliberately to ignore this false picture that distorted freedom, she wrote in Moses, Man of the Mountain, who was something internal. The man himself must make his own emancipation. And she declared her first novel of a manifesto against the arrogance of whites, assuming that Black lives are only defensive reactions to white actions. Her strategy was not calculated to please. What we might think of as Hurston's mythic realism, lush and dense within the lyrical Black idiom, seemed politically retrograde to the proponents of a social or critical realism. If Wright, Ellison, Brown, and Hurston were engaged in a battle over ideal fictional modes with which to present the Negro clearly, Hurston lost the battle, but not the war. After Hurston and her choice of style for the Black novel was silenced for nearly 3 decades, what we have witnessed since is clearly a marvelous instance of the return of the repressed. For Zora Neale Hurston has been rediscovered in a manner unprecedented in the Black tradition. Several Black women writers, among whom are some of the most accomplished writers in America today, to be repeated, imitated, and revised, and in acts of textual bonding. Responding to Wright's critique, Hurston claimed that she had wanted at long last to write a Black novel and not a treatise on sociology. It is this urge that resonates in Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon and Beloved, and in Walker's depiction of Hurston as our prime symbol of racial health, a sense of Black people as complete, complex, undiminished human beings, a sense that is lacking in so much Black writing and literature. In a tradition in which male authors have ardently denied Black literary paternity, this is a major development, one that the refinement, a tradition within the tradition, a Black woman's voice. The resurgence of popular and academic readerships of Hurston's work signifies her multiple canonization in the Black and the American and the feminist traditions. Within the critical establishment, scholars of every stripe have found in Hurston's texts for all seasons. More people have read Hurston's work since 1975 than did between the date and the publication of her first novel in 1937. And I'm one of them. Part 3. Rereading Hurston, I am always struck by the density of intimate experiences she cloaked in richly elaborated imaginary. It is this concern for the figurative capacity of Black language, for what a character in Mules and Men calls a hidden meaning, just like the Bible. The inside meaning of words that unites Hurston's anthropological studies with her fiction. The folklore Hurston collected so meticulously as Boas's student at Barnard became metaphors, allegories, and performances in her novels. The traditional reoccurring canonical metaphors of Black culture. Always more of the novelist than social scientist. Even Hurston's academic collections center on the quality of the imagination that makes these lives whole and splendid. But it is in the novel that Hurston's use of the Black idiom realizes its fullest effect. In Jonah's Gourdvine, her first novel, for instance, the errant preacher John, as described by Robert Hemingway as a poet who graces his world with language but cannot find the words to secure his own personal grace. This concern for language and for the natural poets whom bring barbaric splendor of word and song into the very camp of the mockers not only connects to her two disciplines, but also makes of the suspended linguistic moment a thing to be held indeed. Invariably, Hurston's writing depends for its strength on the text, not the context, as does John's climatic sermon, a tour de force of Black image and metaphor. Imagine and metaphor define John's world. His failure to interpret himself leads finally to his self-destruction. As Robert Hemingway, Hurston's biography concludes, such passages eventually add up to a theory of language and behavior. Using the spyglass of anthropology, her work celebrates rather than moralizes. It shows rather than tells, such that both behavior and art become self-evident as the tale texts and hoodoo rituals accrete during the reading. As Arthur, she functions as a midwife participating in the birth of a body of folklore. The first wandering contacts with natural law. The myths she describes so accurately are in fact alternative modes for perceiving reality and never just condescending depictions of the quaint. Hurston sees the dozens. For example, that age-old Black ritual of graceful insult as, among other things, a verbal defense of the sanctity of the family, conjured through ingenious plays of word. Though attacked by Wright and virtually ignored by the literary heirs, Hurston's ideas about language and craft undergird many of the most successful contributions to Afro-American literature that followed. Part 4. We can understand Hurston's complex and contradictory legacy more fully if we examine Dust Tracks on the Road, her own controversial account of her life. Hurston didn't make significant parts of herself up, like the masquerading part on the disguise for the ball, like a character in her fictions. In this way, Hurston wrote herself and sought in her works to rewrite the self of the race, its several private and public guises, largely for ideological reasons. That which she chooses to reveal is the life of her imagination, as it sought to mold and interpret her environment. That which she silences and deletes, similarly, is all that her readership would draw upon to delimit or pigeonhole her life as a synecdoche of the race problem, an exceptional part standing for the debased whole. Hurston's achievement in Dust Tracks is twofold. First, she gives us a writer's life rather than an account, as she says, of the Negro problem. So many events in her text are figured in terms of Hurston's growing awareness of mastery of books and language. Language and linguistic rituals as spoken and written both by masters of the Western tradition and by ordinary members of the Black community. These two speech communities, as it were, are Hurston's great sources of inspiration, not only in her novels, but also in her autobiography. The representation of her sources of language seems to be her principal concern as she constantly shifts back and forth between her literate narrator's voice and a highly idiomatic Black voice found in wonderful passages of free, indirect discourse. Hoo-wee. Hurston moves in and out of these distinct voices effortlessly, seamlessly, just as she does in Their Eyes to chart Janie's coming to consciousness. It is this usage of a divided voice, a double voice, unreconciled, that strikes me as her great achievement. The verbal analog of her double experiences as a woman in a male-dominated world and as a Black person in a non-Black world. A woman writer's revision of W.E.B. Du Bois' metaphor of double consciousness for the hyphenated African American. Her language very there is something about pause like death dropping off the heart, like death dropping off the heart, like leaves in a dry underground caves. The soul lives in the stinkly air. People can be slave ships and shoes. Everywhere else she analyzes Black idioms used by the culture, raised they know how to call names, she concluded, then list some, such as gator mouth, box ankle, puzzle gut, shovel footed, eyes looking like skinny guinea nuts, and mouths looking like a dishpan full of broke up crockery. Immediately following the passage about her mother's death, she writes, the master maker in his making had made old Death, made him with big, soft feet and square toes, made him with a face that reflects the face of all things, but neither changes itself, nor is mirrored anywhere. Made the body of Death out of infinite hunger, made a weapon in his hand to satisfy his needs. This was the morning of the day of the beginning of things. Language in these passages is not merely adornment, as Hurston describes a key Black linguistic practice. Rather, manner and meaning are perfectly in tune. She says the thing in which most meaningful manner. Nor is she being cute or pandering to the condescending white readership. She is naming emotions, as she says, in the language both deeply personal and culturally specific. The second reason that Dust Tracks succeeds in literature arises from the first. Hurston's unresolved tension between her double voice signifies her full understanding of modernism. Hurston uses the two voices in her text to celebrate the psychological fragmentation both of modernity and of the Black American. As Barbara Johnson has written, hers is the rhetoric of division rather than a fiction of psychological or cultural unity. Zora Neale Hurston, the real Zora Neale Hurston that we long to locate in this text, dwells in the silence that separates these two voices. She is both and neither, bilingual and mute. The strategies helps to explain her attraction to so many contemporary critics and writers. Who can turn to her works again and again only to be startled at her remarkable artistry. But the life that Hurston could write was not the life she could live. In fact, Hurston's life so much more readily than does that the standard sociology rendering reveals how economic limits determine our choices even more than does violence or love. Put simply, Hurston wrote well when she was comfortable, wrote poorly when she was not. Financial problems, book sales, grants the fellowships to few and too paltry, ignorant editors, and a smothering patron. I'm reading more. And a smothering patron produced the sort of dependence that affects, if not determines, her style, a relation she explored somewhat in what white publishers won't print. We cannot simplify the relation between Hurston's art and her life, nor can we reduce the complexity of her post-war politics, which, rooted in her distaste for the pathological image of blacks, were markedly conservative and Republican. Nor can we sentimentalize her disastrous final decade when she found herself working as a maid on the very day the Saturday Evening Post published her short story, Conscious of the Court, and often found herself without money, surviving after 1957 on unemployment benefits, substitute teaching, and welfare checks. In her last days, Hemingway concludes dispassionately, Zora lived a difficult life, alone, proud, ill, obsessed with a book she could not finish. The excavation of her body, of her buried life, helped a new generation read Hurston again. But ultimately, we must find Hurston's legacy in her art, where she plowed up some literacy and laid by some alphabets. Her importance rests with the legacy of fiction and lore she constructed so cannily. As Hurston herself noted, roll your eyes in ecstasy and ape his every move, but until we have placed something upon his street corner that is our own, we are right back where we were when we fouled our iron collar off. If, as a friend eulogized, she didn't come to you empty, then she does not leave Black literature empty. If her early obscurity and neglect today seem inconceivable, perhaps now, as she wrote of Moses, she has crossed over. Henry Louis Gates Jr. And that was Mules and Men by Zora Neale Hurston. Let me mark my shit. That is the 22nd book down, baby. I done bust 22 books upside the head. Oh! Since I've been reading on here. 22 books upside the head. Ms. Zora Neale Hurston. Mules and Men. Mules and Men. Good read. For me, definitely a good read. Definitely some stuff in there. You know, folklore. Oh, definitely has some funny parts in the folklore, definitely some funny parts in the hoodoo, and some things that I can think about, some stuff to ponder on. Stuff to ponder on in the hoodoo. Have I seen these things before? And if so, where? I need to remember. I might need to go get some piss and throw it on the door. Or something like that, though. But we might have to check out some of her other books. We might have to check out some of the other books by Miss Zora Neale Hurston. The fact that she's a feminist, or she leans more towards being a feminist, probably gonna we'll probably be able to tell that more in some of the other books. I don't think you could see or tell that in Mules and Men. Mules and Men. Oh, another book down. Another book down. Mules and Men. So, we'll put that red with the reeds. The book's red. I'll put the next book that we're gonna read on the the next book to be read, or the next two. We'll try the next two. I got quite a few I want to read. Oh, yeah. All right. These are the next two books on the reading list. So, Who Blessed You will come by Speaking to the Children of Israel, curated by George Fraser and Stan Matthews and Azaniah Israel. It's my partner, Azaniah. So we'll read his book. We'll read his book and get it out the way. And then after reading his book, I think this is the one we'll read. The Medical Apartheid by Harriet A. Washington. We might go into the medical apartheid. Yeah, this one's another pretty lengthy one. I really hate reading lengthy books. I ain't gonna even lie. I hate reading lengthy shit. I really do. But within the growth process, these things will have to be done. This is a journey that will have to be taken. The lengthy books. But next on the list, Who Blessed You? Who Blessed You? That'll be the next book. Terra Infinita and the Dome Under is about these books are concerning I want to say the ice wall, the so-say ice wall, and the stuff hidden from us. We'll see what this says. We'll see what these talk about. Terra Infinita, the detail of the worlds of the theory of the other domes. Then we got Terra Infinita, the trilogy. map the dome worlds. We'll read over these too, or we'll go through some of them and try to see what we can see in these. I don't know which one to read first. Claudio Nocelli. Claudio Nocelli by Claudio Nocelli. And then the One World Tartarians by I definitely got a lot of. I think these gonna have some definite, interesting things. Definite interesting things. But we'll get to those at another time, man. We'll get to those at another time. But for right now, man, I am glad to have and be able to say 22 books down. We are 22 books down, and we are going to make Who Blessed You the 23rd. And I will continue to do my part. Continue to do my part in the destruction of the world, baby, by reading. By reading. Shitting. See, if you could think, if you could hear, if you could smell, if you could talk, if you could feel, if you could walk, you have everything you need to succeed today. Make the best of it. Succeed at whatever you put your mind to. Finish it. Follow through. And try to make your life a better life. Continue to strive for mastery. Mastery of yourself. You know, if you want to be better, shit, before it goes out. Make shalom, everybody. One book at a time, one session at a time, one section at a time, one page at a time, one chapter at a time, one line at a time, here a little there. We can learn and grow from in all these. So have a wonderful day. Learn something. Shalom, everybody. I'm out here. Shalom. I'm out here.